Hello everyone, welcome to Guide and Grow Education. In this class, we are going to discuss ecological succession. But before that, I would like to go for a quick revision of the last class. Quick revision of the last class, what we have seen. Last class, we have discussed about the functioning of ecosystem, and we have discussed the functioning of the ecosystem, in which we have seen productivity in detail. What is productivity? We have discussed. We have seen decomposition in detail. We have also discussed energy flow and biological reactions. Among biological reactions, we have checked food chain and food web. This we have discussed already. That is basically what functioning of ecosystem. In this class, we will be discussing about ecological succession, and also we'll be discussing the nutrient cycling. This we will be discussing in today's class. Alright, so if we discuss about productivity, what is productivity? We all know that sun is the ultimate source of energy. So whatever sun rays falls on earth, among 2 to 5% of photosynthetically active radiation has been utilized by the green plants to produce food in the form of glucose, right? And this is what we call organic matter synthesized by green plants. Now this food is eaten up by large number of organisms. All the other living organisms are dependent on this food. For example, say this food is consumed by herbivores, then consumers. Under consumers, we have primary consumers, we have secondary consumers, we have top carnivores, and when they die, there are decomposers like fungus, actinomides like bacteria that act on those complex organic matter like protein, carbohydrates, fats, fats, or you can also say organic matter, that converts the complex organic matter into simpler substances like carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, right? So this is what we have discussed in the last class. And here, if you say this cycle, if we divide this cycle into certain parts, we will come across all the points. For example, say here, this is sun rays is absorbed by green plants to produce food. 2 to 5% of photosynthetically active radiation was utilized by the green plants to produce food. So whatever the biomass is synthesized by the plants, that biomass we call the gross primary productivity. Whatever the organic matter or biomass produced by green plants, we call the GPP, that is gross primary productivity, right? Now, out of this, what happened? The plants, suppose 100% of organic matter which is produced by plants, we call the gross primary productivity. But out of 100%, plant will utilize some amount of energy for itself, and we call that respiration. We call the energy utilized by the plants, we call it respirational loss. Right? And after respiration loss, whatever is the left out organic matter, we call it net primary productivity, on which this net primary productivity is available to other consumers, right? So if you see productivity is of two types. What are the two types of productivity? GPP and NPP. Now what is GPP? GPP is nothing but gross primary productivity. What is gross primary productivity? The amount of organic matter synthesized by green plants. Amount of organic matter produced by green plants, we call it gross primary productivity. And what is net primary productivity? Gross primary productivity minus the amount of energy utilized by the plants to undergo respiration. We call the respirational loss is nothing but NPP, right? And here if we see here, there are, so this is what is the productivity. And what is decomposition? Decomposition is what, when these organisms, herbivores, plants, primary consumer, secondary consumer, top carnivores, when they die, what will happen? The decomposers like bacteria, fungi, they will come, they will break down the complex organic matter present inside their body into simpler substance, and this simpler substances has been utilized by the green plants from soil for preparation of food again, right? So this is what is the decomposition reactions. Now if we discussed about energy flow, what is energy flow? If you see here, green plants produce food, yes, organic matter, which we call gross primary productivity. Now on this food, the entire living organism on earth is dependent on the green plants for food. So you see, herbivores eat the energy, take energy from food. Yes, we are eating food means what? We are getting energy. Suppose 100 joule of energy is being produced by plant. Now among 100 joule, what will happen? 10% of energy will pass to the herbivores. That means it is 10 joule, right? So from herbivores, again 10% of energy is passed to the consumer, 1 joule, then secondary consumer, then top carnivores, right? So this is what we call energy flow. This is what we call the flow of energy. And how the energy flow is happening? Energy flow is processing in the form of food chain and food web. Now what is food chain? If you see here, if you focus this part, the green plants, if you see this food produced by green plants, this is one, green plants produce food which is herbivores, which are dependent on green plants for food, then these consumers are dependent on herbivores for food. So you see this, each of these organisms which is taking part in the food chain, we call the trophic level. What do we call? We call the trophic level. What is trophic level? Each of the organisms that participates in the food chain, we call them trophic level. And what is food chain? You see, this entire process of green plants being eaten up by herbivores, being eaten up by consumers, primary, secondary and top, we call this food chain, right? So this is one food chain, so we call the single food chain. But if two or more food chains are connected, say these green plants are eaten up by deer, eaten up by tiger, so if two or more food chains are connected at one point, connected to each other, we call that food web. And in nature it exists in the form of food web. Clear? So that's what we have seen in the last class. And in next class, I mean in today's class, we will be discussing about ecological succession and nutrient cycling. So let's move to the ecological succession. What is ecological succession? So if we deal with ecological succession, what is ecological succession? If this, let me make you understand in a very simple words. If this is a field which has no life on it, so we call it, suppose, bare area. Bare area. So with time, what will happen? There will be certain changes on that particular area. So after a few years, what you will observe here, you will see some grasses started growing here. And this happened due to dispersal, wind dispersal, right? There are certain plants. They will remain for few years. Then after that, what again will happen? This particular grasses will be replaced by another type of plant, and we call it what? Let me draw it here. Suppose this is another type of plant. So what happened? After few years, these grasses have been replaced by another type of plants. Now again, after few years, you will see that these plants are also replaced by another type of plant. And this time, say trees, all very mature trees have grown in this area, right? So here you see the entire changes right from the barren area to the development of a stable community. Here we can call this as a stable community, right? So here what we have seen is, we have seen the changes that has been taken place on the bare area, right from the bare area to the establishment of a stable community. So this entire thing, what we call it ecological succession. And the organisms, the living organism which first started growing on this bare area, what we call this, we call them pioneer community. We call them pioneer community. That means this is the first living organism, first living form on bare area. We call it what? Pioneer community. And the stable community which remains for a longer duration, we call them climax community. What we call? We call them climax community. And this from here, from 1, 2, suppose 3, 4, and this changes 1, 2, 3, 4. We call this what we call? We call this transitory communities. We call this transitory communities, and we define these transitory communities with a term. We call them what? Several stages. What we call? We call them several stages, right? So any community tries to maintain the equilibrium with prevailing condition of the environment. It changes with the changing environmental conditions. So whatever the changes we have seen right from the point number 1 to point number 4, that all deals with all happens due to changes in the environmental conditions. Sometimes the activities within the community itself or environmental changes can affect a change in the community. Ecosystem may be defined as an orderly process of community development that involves changes in species structure of community processes. The community which developed as initial community is known as pioneer community. Already I defined you. The transitory communities are called as serial stages or developed stages. When a system gets established or when a system gets stabilized, when a system gets proper stability, the final community which lasts for a longer period is known as climax community. Clear? So that is ecological succession. So if you see, just give me 2 minutes, it's not working actually. So if you see, this is what we call ecological succession. Now if we check the process of succession, how it works, the steps of succession, how it develops, how succession happens. So the process of succession, we define it with the help of few steps. First is the nudation. Nudation means what? Development of bare area. Nudation is a process of development of bare area, right? Invasion is the establishment of life on bare area is what we call it invasion. Competition and coaction. So what exactly competition and coaction? Suppose this is a bare area, so there is no living form. So after sometimes you will see that there is a development of grasses, right? So what will happen now? Once this grasses gets developed, there will be a competition among grasses, and after competition, what will happen? There will be a scarcity of resources. And why they will compete? They will compete for the food and habitat, right? So there will be a competition among the plants for food and habitat, isn't it? So this competition and coaction is also a part of succession. Then reaction. So out of competition, what will happen? Some will survive, some may not be survived, and some gets replaced by other types of living form. Say grass replaced by trees, right? So this one. Then we can expect the establishment of stabilized community, which we call climax community. So that's what we have seen here. Now, if you see nudation, see here, nudation is the development of bare area without any form of life. This area may develop due to topographic, soil erosion, gravity, water inland, landslides, volcanic activity, etc. Invasion is the successful establishment of life in that area. The species actually reaches that area from other places, the forces of migration and dispersal. After reaching the new area, the process of successful establishment of species is known as ecasis. So when new life form get established on the new area, this process of establishment of species on this new area, what we call the ecasis. In plants, seed germinates, seedling grows, and adult starts to reproduce and increase their number. This process is called aggregation, right? Coming to competition and coaction. After aggregation, large number of individual of species increased in a limited area develops competition and coaction for space and nutrition. In this process, changes within the community can be observed and the species is unable to compete with the other number of individuals would be discarded. So mutation is first what is the development of bare area. What do you mean by bare area? Bare area is an area without any life. Bare area is an area without any life. Coming to invasion. So what is invasion? Invasion is basically the establishment of life on the bare area. Invasion is what? It is a establishment of life on bare area, and this process of establishment of life on bare area, what we call it ecasis. Now after establishment, what will happen? Competition. What kind of competition? Competitions among individuals for space and food. Also we call it nutrition, right? So this is what will happen. Next is the reaction. So if we talk about reaction, it is an important stage in the process of succession. The mechanism of modification of environment through the influence of living organisms starts in this stage. As a result of this process change takes place in soil structures, water, pH, light, conditions, temperature of the environment. Due to all this, the environment is modified and becoming unsuitable for the existing community. So what is reaction? Because of certain environmental conditions, like natural calamities, like flood, any kind of environmental conditions, what will happen? There is a modification in the existing community. There is a modification in the existing community, and this modification results in the replacement of existing species with the new one. Replacement of existing species with the new one. This is what we call reaction. Then stabilization. Finally, there occurs a stage in the process, then the final community or the terminal community becomes more or less stabilized for a longer period, and that is what we call the stabilized community. The stabilized community that develops, what we call them climax community. What we call them? We call them climax community. An important characteristics of all community is that their composition and structure constantly change in response to the changing environmental condition. So suppose let me talk about this bare area. So what will happen? This area will remain bare only for a specific period of time. It will not be bare area permanently. Because why? Because of changes in the environmental conditions. What will happen? This bare area will be replaced by some living organism. So you will see some plants, grasses, it will grow, right? Again, when these grasses, 2 or 3 grass samples, if they start growing, they will reproduce. Yes. So at one point of time, what will happen? There will be a competition between the species, between the individuals for space and nutrition. At one point of time, you will see that again due to change in environmental condition, these grasses have been replaced by another type of plants, isn't it? Again, after a certain period of time, what we will see, you will see the development of trees here. So this is what we call stable community, and since this is stable, we call this as a climax community. So now the entire concept of right from the existence of the bare area to the change of species, we call this entire thing, we call ecological succession. What we call this ecological succession, right? So the gradual and fairly predictable changes in the species composition of a given area is called ecological succession. During succession, some species colonize an area and their population become more numerous, whereas population of other species decline and even disappear. And this, you see, the grasses has been replaced by another one, right? So this changes in the species here we call this transitory changes or several stages, transitory stages, or we call them several stages. Clear? That is what is the ecological succession. Now, if you see ecological succession, it is of two types: primary succession and secondary succession. What is primary succession? Suppose this is a rock or this is a bare area. What will happen? First, the first living form that grows on this bare area, this process, the first living plants or living organism, the first life form that exists is called primary succession. Yes. Now what is secondary succession? Secondary succession is what? When suppose this is again area, and where what happened, these grasses, you see, when these grasses are replaced by another type of plant, say these grasses has been replaced by another type of plants, this is what we call secondary succession. So here the grasses, the entire species of grasses has been replaced by another type of plants or another type of biotic communities, and we call this secondary succession. This is for the second time. The first species is being replaced, and this is the establishment of second type of species, and we call this secondary succession. And primary succession is the first life form that exists on the bare area. We call that primary succession, right? Based on the nature of habitat, let me tell you, whether it is water or dry area, succession of plants occur, right? So if succession of plants we study in water or in aquatic form, we call the hydric succession, and if we study in the dry form, we call the Gerard succession, right? So these are in primary succession in water. The pioneers are small phytoplanktons, right? Phytoplanktons, they are replaced with time by rooted submerged plants, rooted floating angiosperms, followed by free floating plants, then reed swamp, marsh meadows, scrub, and finally trees. So this is the succession. So if you see here in water, in aquatic, what is the first species that comes? That is what we call phytoplankton, right? Then these phytoplanktons, what will happen to the phytoplanktons? They will be replaced by rooted submerged plants. Then rooted submerged plants will be again replaced by rooted floating angiosperms. Rooted floating angiosperms is again replaced by free floating plants, and this has been again replaced by reed swamp, and reed swamp has been again replaced by marsh meadow, this has been replaced by scrub, and finally you can see trees. So this is a succession. Clear? Now what is succession? If I say what is ecological succession, what we have seen in the ecological succession, suppose, let me explain you, this is a bare area. What is bare area? That means no life exists. So what will happen with time? You will see there is a change of there is a change in the what? There is a change in this bare area, and you will see some grasses grows here, right? Again with time, what will happen? You will see that these grasses will be replaced by another type of plant. And this is, let me show this with, this is another type of plant that grows on this area. Now again after some time, what will you see? You will see that this has been replaced by again another type of plant, and these are again another type of plant. And again with time, you will see that this is what? This is again changed with some establishment of trees. Here you see some trees grown here, right? So here if you see here if you noticed, what we can see is this part. This is a bare area, no life, right? And this is the establishment of first life form, first biotic. If you see, this is the establishment of first living organism that established on the barren area. And what we call this first living organism, we call them pioneer community. What we call? We call them pioneer community, right? And after sometimes, what will you see? You will see that this pioneer community is again replaced by another communities, and at last you will see there is an establishment of stable community. And this establishment of stable community, what we call the climax community. What we call the climax community. And right from the barren area to climax community, there are certain transitory changes. There are certain what? Transitory changes. And what we call these transitory changes, we call them seral stages. What we call? We call them seral stages. Clear? And one more thing here this is the first living organism that occupies the barren area, so we call them primary succession, right? And here this organism replace this first living form. This is the second life form that established here, so we will be calling this what? Secondary succession. Clear? Yes, this is what is the ecological changes, the gradual and predictable changes in species community over a area over a specific time period. We call them ecological succession. Clear? Next, coming to biogeochemical processes. So all animals in the earth are recycled again and again. The major elements such as oxygen, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus, and sulfur are essential ingredients that make up organism. Biogeochemical cycle refers to the flow of such chemical elements and compounds between organisms and physical environment. So what is biochemical process? We can also call it nutrient cycling or cyclic exchange of nutrients between living and non-living environment. You can also call this what? Cyclic changes of materials you can also call this cyclic changes of materials between living organisms, cyclic changes of materials between living organisms and environment is called biogeochemical cycling. Clear? So here nutrient cycling are of two types, gaseous and sedimentary. The reservoir for gaseous type of nutrient cycling, nitrogen carbon cycle exists in the atmosphere, and for sedimentary sulfur phosphorus cycle, the reservoir is located in earth crust. So we will see first carbon cycle. So exactly what happens, carbon enters into the living world in the form of carbon dioxide through the process of photosynthesis as carbohydrate. These organic compounds are then passed from the producers to consumers, and this carbon is finally returned to the surrounding medium by the process of respiration and decomposition of plants and animals by decomposers. So here what will happen, see here, sunlight. In nature, carbon is available in the form of carbon dioxide, right, in the gaseous form. So this will be utilized by green plants for photosynthesis, and after photosynthesis what we get? We get glucose, C6H12O6. Now what will happen? This glucose, other organism, other life forms, and other, you can say other life forms, you can say other living organisms or other life forms, what they do, they are dependent on this glucose, yes or no? Yes. And when they respire, they eliminate, they make carbon dioxide out and oxygen in, yes or no? And when they die, the decomposers, what they do, the decomposers, they will act on their body, which is made up of carbohydrates, fats, and they convert this organic matter back to carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur. Again carbon is what? Released back to the environment. So this released back in environment. So this cycling of carbon, this is a simple, I have shown you the carbon, but if you say entirely, there will be a nitrogen cycling like in this way, phosphorus, sulfur, right? So this exchange of this cycling of carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, water happens, and that is what we call biogeochemical cycling. Clear? Coming to nitrogen cycle. Nitrogen cycle is a biogeochemical procedure that occurs when nitrogen is transmitted from the atmosphere to living organism and then returned to the atmosphere in various forms. You see, nitrogen exists in N2 form, but plants and animals cannot take nitrogen in such form. So what will happen? There is a process we call ammonification, where nitrogen is converted into ammonia, right? And this process, what we call this process ammonification. We call this process ammonification, right? And after sometimes, what will you see? You will see that this ammonia is again converted to nitrite and nitrate, and this process we call nitrification. What we call? We call nitrification. Clear? And after nitrification, what will you see? Yes, again this nitrogen is converted back into nitrogen, and this process we call it denitrification. So we are not going to discuss in detail about this nitrogen cycle. Only you have to know you should have an idea how nitrogen is being cycled in nature. So you see here nitrogen, yes, it is changed into ammonia, yes, and this process we call it nitrogen fixation, yes, or ammonification also, because it is the production of ammonia from organic nitrogen. Clear? Now this ammonia has been changed to nitrite, nitrate, and this is what we call nitrification, right? And again this nitrate and nitrite is reconverted back in the form of nitrogen, which we call denitrificants. This is done by Pseudomonas. These all are done by bacteria and microorganisms. Pseudomonas, denitrificants, and this nitrification is done by Nitrosomonas, Nitrosococcus. So many organisms are involved in this, right? So this is what is the cycling. And if you see water cycle, again the water cycle shows the continuous movement of water within the earth and atmosphere. It is a complex system that includes many different processes. Liquid water evaporates into water vapor, condenses to form cloud, and precipitates back to earth in the form of rain, right? You see this is groundwater, right? This is surface water. What will happen? They will evaporate. They will go up in the form of water vapor. And this evaporation, after they reach to a certain height, there will be the condensation process, right? So what exactly happens in condensation process? There will be what? What is condensation process? There will be the development of the first, what exactly is happening is water is getting evaporated to water vapor, right? So after, this is what we call evaporation. This is what we call evaporation. Now after evaporation, what will happen? After evaporation, there will be a process we call the condensation. What is condensation? Now here water is turning into gas, right? Water is turning into gas, and gas is turning back into liquid. That is water. We call condensation. So what is condensation? Condensation is when a gas turns to a liquid. So this water vapor is turning back to the liquid, right? That is what we call condensation. Vapor is converted. So what is condensation? Here vapor is converted into liquid. Here what is happened? The vapor is converted into liquid, isn't it? Now next what will happen? Next will happen precipitation. Now what is precipitation? When water released from the clouds. What is precipitation? Precipitation is a process when water is released from the cloud in the form of rain. Precipitation is a process in which water is released from the clouds in the form of rain. Right? So what we have seen, this is groundwater. What is water cycling? Groundwater or any kind of surface water. What will happen? What will happen? They will evaporate. Evaporation. Also you will get certain also there is a loss of, see, plants also lost water in the form of vapor, and that is what we call transpiration. You see, this is what is a transpiration from plants, right? So what is transpiration? Loss of water from plants in the form of water vapor, in the form of water vapor. Clear? What will happen now? This evaporation, what will happen? This will leads to the condensation. Condensation means what? See here, water will turn into liquids. Now what will happen? Precipitation. Now happens your precipitation. Now again in precipitation, the water is released back into the environment. Yes. So here you see evaporation is what? This is a water turning into gas. Gas is turning back into liquid, isn't it? Gas is turning back into liquid, and here rain, and then again this is maintained. Am I clear? Yes. So here evaporation is what? Loss of water in the form of water vapor, which is we call gas, and this is water. This is liquid, right? And back, this gas is again converted. This gas is back converted to liquid. We call condensation. And then this liquid is again the process by which water is released from the clouds in the form of rain. This is what we call precipitation. So this is how water cycle is regulated, right? Clear, everyone? Yes. So let's go for the quick revision of this class. What we have seen in this class, we have seen ecological succession. So ecological succession, we have seen how succession happens, right? This, what we have seen in ecological succession, we have seen bare area without life form is being replaced by the what? First biotic community. Yes, it involves, then this it is converted or it is replaced by second biotic community. This is replaced by third biotic community. Yes, this is replaced by fourth or stable biotic community. right? And this entire thing happens through a process called nudation, invasion, competition, reaction, and stabilization, right? And if you see the first community, this is the first biotic community which exists or which get established on the bare area, so we call this community as pioneer community. What we call them pioneer community, right? This pioneer community again replaced by second, third, and at last you see there is a establishment of stable community. We call them climax community. What we call them climax community. Clear? Yes. And this transitional changes right from bare area, these transitional changes we call them several stages. What we call them several stages. Another thing here, this is the first species, so we also call them primary succession, and this one second, so we call them secondary succession. Clear? This is what we have seen. And next we have discussed about nutrient cycling. What is nutrient cycling or biogeochemical process? It is the exchange of materials between living and non-living things. For example, say we have discussed about carbon cycle. What will happen? Say, let me show you here carbon cycle. What is happening? Plants will take carbon dioxide plus sunlight plus water, right? And what they do, green plants, they will take this and prepare food in the form of glucose, C6H12O6, right? And this glucose is taken up by all other living organisms for their growth and energy, right? And now this living organism during their life, they take oxygen in and releases out carbon dioxide back into the environment. And when they die, what will happen? The decomposers will come and they will convert their carbohydrates, proteins, all organic matter back into the nature in the form of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, right? This is what is the carbon cycle. Next we have seen about the nitrogen cycle. So what is nitrogen cycle? Nitrogen exists in the form of N2. Plants cannot take nitrogen, so it is converted to ammonia, and this process we call nitrogen fixation. Also there is a development of ammonia from organic matter. Organic matter means what? In the soil organic matters are present, right? So they will release ammonia, right? Suppose a bird, when they excretory substances from, they excrete in the form of ammonia. Yes, this is what we call ammonification. Now this ammonia is converted to nitrite or nitrate, right? So what will happen? This is again reconverted back to nitrogen, right? And this process is what we call it nitrogen fixation. This one we call ammonification. This one we call nitrification. Yes, and this one we call what? Denitrification. Clear? This is we have seen. Apart from this, we have also seen water cycle. Exactly what will happen, let me discuss this here. I have not added extra slides, so let me discuss this here. In water cycle, what will happen? See here everyone, this is a surface water, or you can say groundwater. What will happen? It will evaporate. It will what? evaporate, and also there is a loss of water. There is a loss of water from green plants, and this process we call transpiration. What we call transpiration. So what is exactly happening? This water is converting back into gas. And now after evaporation, what will happen? There is a process called condensation, where gas is converted to liquid, right? After condensation, what will happen? Precipitation. What is precipitation? It is a process of release of water from clouds, and now again water is reconverted, right? So this is what we call water cycle. With this, I would like to end up the class. Next we will discuss about ecological pyramid. Thank you so much, students, for your time.